Welcome to White Shadow Fare, where I'm making it homemade and I'm making it with love. Today, I'm canning raw packed diced tomatoes.
Stop running your fingers through your
You're going to peel your tomatoes, you're going to give them a quick boil, you're going to dunk them in some ice water, then you're going to be able to take those peels off super easy, get all of your tomatoes ready. So for my batch today, I used a half a bushel.
When I pump the brakes, what do you see green? I'm not ready, no, I'm not ready.
To start with, you are going to wash those tomatoes. You're going to take the cores out, slice an X on the bottom of them, and then you're going to put them in small batches into boiling water. So you let them stay in the water for about 60 seconds, maybe even up to a minute and a half, and you'll start to see the skin wrinkling. Throw it into your ice water, and within a few seconds you'll be able to touch them. They won't be too hot, and you can see that the peels just come off extremely easily. Now, I did keep my peels and I dehydrated them and made tomato powder, but that is for another day. I threw those peels in one container, put my tomatoes in another container, and when they were all completely done and peeled, then it was time to chop them. Now, sometimes the peels don't come off as easy as you want. Just use a paring knife and pull off anything that's sticking. And that's the perfect time to also, if there's any bad spots that you didn't already cut out of your tomatoes, that's the time to do that. So you can see how beautiful they look. You aren't really cooking these tomatoes, you're really just cooking the very outside to get that skin off. And that does brighten the color up to a nice, beautiful ruby red color. Now with this giant pile, it's time to dice them up. So I'm just using a cutting board, but be very careful here because they are a bit slippery. And you determine how much you want to dice them. You could do the same thing if you were just even putting these into quarters or into halves. Whatever you use for your cooking, we use a lot of diced tomatoes in the things that we cook here. So just go ahead, keep dicing until you are completely done, and then we're ready to move on to the canning process. So at this point in time, while this is going on,
stop running your fingers through your hair. I'm putting my guard up and leaving it there. I won't be a fantasy if you're not the one for me.
now before I started anything, I got my jars ready. So when you do that, you're going to look over your jars, make sure that there are no cracks at all, and wash them up good and put them off to the side. Then inside each jar, you are going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of citric acid and a 1/2 teaspoon of canning salt. Pack your jars with your diced tomatoes, and I just use a spatula to kind of smush them down because you want to really pack them in there. If you loosely pack them, you're going to have all sorts of problems. So push down as hard as you can and then top it off with more tomatoes and push and push and push. And if your tomatoes are not juicy enough, you can top it off with a little bit of water. You do want to leave a 1/4 of an inch headspace here, but before you go ahead and do any of that, you're going to use a plastic knife or a debubbler. Put that down inside your tomato jar in a couple of different places and kind of push from one side to the other, getting any air bubbles out. Then go ahead and wipe the rim of your jar off with some white vinegar. Get it completely clean before you go ahead and put your lid on, which you have washed. Put the band on and make sure that you do not tighten it too much. They say fingertip tight, which just means as strong as your fingers can make it without kind of putting your whole wrist into it. And you're going to just repeat the process over and over again until you run out of tomatoes or jars. If you have any extra tomatoes, go ahead and add them into a salad for that night. or you can even put them in the freezer to add to soup later on.
Don't make me love you.
Once again, make sure you really pack those tomatoes in there. Now there is another way of doing this where you cook the tomatoes first. This is a raw pack, so I'm just really putting them in a cold jar, cold tomatoes, and then I will put them into warm water, not boiling water, because you do not want to shock them. The saying is cold food, cold jar goes into kind of cold water. Hot food, hot jar goes into hot water.
Stop running your fingers through your hair. I'm putting my guard up and leaving it there. I won't be a fantasy if you're not the one for me. I know what you want when it's you and me. Don't know what you see, but I'm not.
And there you can see the start of my jars, and they look so pretty and nice and red.
I'm not ready, no, I'm not ready to love you. So
I'm using a different canner than most of you probably have, so I'm just filling up my line to where it shows me. It's an electric Presto canner. This is made for both water bathing and pressure canning. It's not the same as an Instant Pot pressure canner, so don't confuse the two. This is strictly for canning items. And here you can see that I'm just putting the lid on, and I have chosen to do the 25-minute pressure canning instead of the 85 minutes that's recommended for water bath canning.
I'm not ready to
Now, if you pre-cook your tomatoes, that does cut down the time. This is just the way that I do it. And here you can see that my canner is super easy. I have an induction stove, so this is what I chose to get instead of cooking on top of my stove. And here they are when they're all done. You can see that there's quite a bit of liquid in there. That's what the tomatoes let off for themselves. I've been using these in my cooking for the past few weeks, and they are delicious, so I hope you will give them a try.
love you.
Thank you for joining me here at White Shadow Fare.